Welcome to episode 2 in our discussion. In this episode, we'll learn a little more about what children should know and what providers should know about race.
Play, think, listen, learn, play.
The
think,
plan you're
listen,
looking for is here.
listen, learn,
One moment. Let me get my phone set.
play,
I'm feeling good.
Hi,
Listen.
we're here and we're a
play,
little weird.
think,
Can
listen,
I just say how
learn,
happy that
play,
makes my heart?
Think, listen, learn.
What do young children need to know about race? What do our providers who are listening in need to know?
I've said this before plenty of times to this group and to a lot of other groups that my discussions around race and equity didn't happen until I came to CCR. So when I was engulfed as a teacher or part of management for a center, the unfortunate truth was that those conversations were not happening. It just wasn't part of the culture. So I'm thankful to be part of an organization where this is at the forefront of what we're trying to do in terms of ending systemic racism and talking about implicit bias and addressing these within ourselves as coaches, but also with the providers that we work with. And hopefully that, is going down to the kids and the families as well. I do want to add, though, I grew up in an era where it was I see no color. And I thought I was really cool because I had a variety of friends that were all of different skin tones and all of different races. And I was like, yeah, I've got it good. I've got a bunch of friends from different cultures and backgrounds. But it wasn't again until I came to CCR where I realized that I see no color was the wrong approach. It made me realize I need to change the way that I look at things when it comes to race, but also how I share that conversation with our providers as well.
A phrase that I've heard commonly is, oh, things are black or white, and again, it's going along with that point of things are either this or that. But usually when they say it's a black or white situation or a black or white choice, they're trying to say that one is easy, one is difficult, one is good, one is bad. And so even those phrases that are just kind of commonly used build those biases. And so that's what I think is just like it's important for adults to self-reflect on their own biases and have other people to talk with it. I think we need to offer that to children. Obviously, we need to have it at conversations at their level, and it involves a lot of purposeful listening. Listen to the children. What do they say about their own skin color, their own skin tones? What do they say about the children around them? What kind of adjectives are they using about those features? Is it a pretty thing? Is it a weird thing? Like what kind of words are they using? Because we know that even at these young preschool type ages, they are going to have those biases. And so start having those conversations and start trying to break that down. If you're having a conversation about, well, why do you always say this one thing is icky or this one thing is weird? If we're having that conversation at 3, that's going to plant the little seed. So then they're not like someone like myself or like Chris, who were already in the work field before we're having those self-reflective moments. If we can start having those moments at 3, by the time they're 20 or 30 or 40, they're going to be so much further along on that journey than if we just let them keep thinking what they're thinking without any support.
When I think about what providers need to know, I want to share something that I've learned from my years of coaching. And it wasn't a sudden realization. Part of the work that I've done with providers, and which I suspect nearly every coach has done with providers, is sometimes observe children of concern. And it gradually dawned on me as over the course of a couple of years when I first started coaching, that nearly all of the requests to observe particular children were requests being made by white teachers or providers to observe children of color, especially Black boys. I didn't know in any one of those requests on its own would not have helped me get to this realization, but it was putting them all together and saying, is there a pattern here? And why does that pattern exist? Now, does that pattern mean that every single person who made one of those requests was being other than sincere? Not at all. But what it does mean is that it's really easy as white people, whether we are providers, teachers, or anything else in the society, it's really easy to be carrying around what we would call implicit bias, biases that you're not aware of and that subconsciously shape your responses. So I ended up making a decision in a particular case when I'd gotten the umpteenth request to observe a child of color, in this case, the only Black boy in a preschool classroom, and the white teacher and the white director wanted me to observe this boy. I said, okay, I'll do that, but I'm going to simultaneously observe a second child in your classroom who's another boy who happens to be white. And I'm going to compile notes and observations for you about both kids. And what showed up even more strikingly than I would have expected was that there were different responses by teachers in the room to what the two kids did. If the Black boy was tossing a piece of food from the dramatic play area over the dramatic play furniture into the next area, the teacher was immediately calling that boy out. Actually, the white boy who was in the kitchen area at the same time did the exact same thing, and nothing was said to the white boy. When the Black boy climbed up onto a cubby to reach something that was on top of the cubby, the Black boy was upbraided by a teacher. When the white boy did the exact same thing, nothing was said to the white boy. I was able to point to these, in that particular case, I was able to point to these episodes. I was able to say, as far as I can tell, both boys are completely normally developing. You have garden variety behavior for 4-year-old kids going on. And here's something interesting that I noticed, the differential response. I'm wondering what lies behind that differing response. That was an aha moment for the lead teacher in that classroom. And it was the beginning of a long and fruitful conversation that I was able to have with both the director over the course of some months, with the director and with the teachers in that room. And I challenged them to come up with a different approach for dealing with what was happening, and to make sure to be consciously and positively including the lone Black boy in that classroom in various kinds of activities, and giving that kid as many positive strokes as the white kids in that room were getting. The kid's behavior understandably changed in response. So I made it, going forward, a stated practice of mine that I would only observe a child of color if I was simultaneously observing a white kid and we were able to compare responses, and that I was only willing to do observations at all if we took suspending or expelling the kid from school out of the picture. And I'm not saying that any of this to pat myself on the back, because it took me a while to notice the pattern. And I don't think that what I did was particularly meritorious. I just think that was a sensible, but I think it was a sensible response. And I was able to help people connect dots in a way they might not have been able to do in their own programs, because they're only familiar with their own situation. Whereas I had the advantage that I go from program to program and see what's happening in a lot of different places. So when I think about what you need to know, I think the first and most important thing I would point to for adults is that there may be things going on that you're complicit with that you're not fully aware of yet. And you may benefit from having a chance to talk, not just with your coach, but with others, to compare notes and say, is my response in this case justifiable? Am I responding to something that's real? Am I responding in an optimal way, even if it is real? And I think especially when we're talking about white people who have been favored in and dominant in our society for hundreds of years, it's important for those of us who are white to be willing to admit that sometimes we fail to notice things that might be perfectly evident to people of color in our society, and to be willing to shift and change for ourselves.
And be observant of how children play. So what they say and then how they play. In the book study group that I'm in, we were talking about the different power dynamics in dramatic play. If we're playing house, who's always the parental figure and who's always maybe the baby? Are you always playing the adult and this person's always playing the baby? And what does that look like? Is this always a white child being like, I'm the mom, I'm the boss, or whatever the play may be? And then it's the Black Indigenous child of color that's always being asked to be a baby or some other less powerful character. So even those types of things, just us as adults being aware of that, and then be willing to have those conversations with, hey, I noticed that when you two play together, it's always this way. You're always the mom, they're always the baby, you're the boss, they're the person buying the supplies at the grocery store or whatever game they're playing. And seeing if you can start having those conversations or start having that role reversal just to get the children more comfortable with those types of play.
Something that came up during the book study, the Don't Look Away book study in my group, was someone talking about media and how race is portrayed in media, and how the illustrators and the artists have to be a little more intentional with how they do use colors. Because when you think about, let's say, like a unnamed Disney movie, it doesn't even have to be named. It's like when like the villain comes, you see dark colors, right? And then when it's the protagonist, it's a bunch of light colors and things of this sort. And so even in the media, children are soaking that in as well, that, oh, okay, well, we tend to associate white with something good or something greater. And then, you see something dark and it's the villain, right? And so, oh no. And then so in real life, that translates to, and then again, a child can be at the grocery store and see someone of dark skin and say, oh my gosh, that person must be bad. Right. And how do we start to turn that around? Because that is I feel like such a primitive idea too. Like, light is good, dark is bad. It's we got a lot of work to do.
So I'm thinking, what do young children need to know about race? I don't think that we have to say race necessarily as part of the curriculum or the word, but to employ of understanding differences. It takes me back thinking about when teaching tolerance, which is no longer called teaching tolerance, brought out, just the essence of looking at our skin and seeing differences in colors, and it's just not black or white, but all the beautiful names that can go with colors, and embracing the beautiful parts, cinnamon and oh my gosh, rose, just beautiful words that you want to associate yourself with, and how does that connect not only for the child but between each other? And is my skin color different? Is it wrong to be different, or is it okay to be different? So, this is not something you just do in a day. This is my lesson on differences in skin color. This is an ongoing thing. And I think that, providers shouldn't feel like, okay, done that, check. I checked it off as a race thing. And I covered my anti-bias curriculum. It's an ongoing process, a process that takes a lot of time, and a lot of time you really need to listen and hear what children are saying about themselves, and what colors they can call themselves that you can embrace with them.
Yeah, I think for providers, we talk about windows and mirrors quite a bit. And it's beyond that, but
Can you
windows.
explain what the
Yeah.
windows and mirrors? Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah. So, and I'm going to borrow someone else's explanation because I think they did a great job that I heard, I think it was in the last couple of weeks, where white children really need windows into other people's lives and lived experiences, where children of color need to see themselves. So see themselves in the mirror in a positive light with joy and pride. Not recently, but in the last, 5 years, they redid the doll test that was done in like the 50s or 60s. And the doll test is where they had a doll that was black and a doll that was white. And they did this with both Black children and white children of both genders. And they prompted the children, these were preschoolers, so 3, 4, which is the doll that's most like you? Which is the doll that's pretty? Which is the good doll?
Yes.
And, that study that was done back in the 50s or 60s was heartbreaking, where the children of color, it's like they knew they were supposed to choose. It's like the messages, they were playing out all the messages they had already received in, if it's a 3-year-old, in 36 months, the messages that they've already received and internalized about what's good and what's bad.
Yeah.
And in such a short time, they're you can see it on their faces, and they've redone that recently, and not much has changed. The dolls have changed a little bit, the hairstyles have changed, the clothes, but the attitudes and the impressions that children are displaying are the same, that good and bad. And so my message to teachers is that, the windows and mirrors and representation matters, but it also has to be authentic and with respect.
Please.
And so you can't just, in your dramatic play area, and that's the area I think I see it often in, what is our, childcare material vendors, oftentimes dress from other countries and other cultures is referred to as costumes. And it's very, and it might be something that is from a religious celebration. It might be something a child may engage in maybe once a year or once in their lifetime, or maybe not at all, depending on where they've grown up, their family, beliefs. But here we have these costumes, as they're referred to, and it's presented to children like, this is how someone in India dresses. This is how someone in, this is how an Eskimo dresses. And it's stereotypical, typically. It's stereotypical. It's not how, if they went to the grocery store, it's not how someone would encounter them. It's not their lived experiences.
Kind of like the tourist approach, huh?
Yeah. So I would encourage teachers to really be authentic about it and do it with respect, and really be willing to examine their own beliefs. I mean, we've heard of teachers, particularly in this last year, that have done and said some horrible racist things. And, we'd like to think no one in our field would have those beliefs, but we know they're there. And we have to do a better job as a system of identifying and screening out and not hiring and bringing those people to have access to children with their racist beliefs, but doing a better job of forcing teachers to examine their beliefs and really to name it. What do I believe? How do I pass that on to children?
Adrian, I think your comments underscore the fact that children are aware of race, whether adults say something to them or not. And so when I think about what do children need to know about race, the first thing that comes to my mind is, what do adults need to know about what children know about race? Because there's still a fairly widespread misconception that if we just don't talk about it, or we talk about it in certain stilted ways every once in a while, then we're going to protect or shield kids from being aware of the messy, grimy realities of race in this society. No, they're picking up on that stuff from the get-go. There are plenty of studies that show that as early as 3 months of age, children are noticing race. What they do with what they see depends on how adults respond, or whether adults respond. So just make an assumption. If I could make a plea of adults, it is assume that child in front of you, or those children in front of you, know a whole lot more than you're giving them credit for, and then forthrightly and boldly respond to them in the moment, and create activities and opportunities that expand their understandings. And you were making the point, Viv, also, which is important, that this is not the work of a day, a week, or even a month. If you did Black History Month, does that mean the other 11 months of the year, you, the white person, fail to notice that there are Black people in this society? What nonsense is that? It's every day is Human History Day, and human history has to include everyone, for example. Every day is Human Culture Day, and human culture includes a whole lot of different cultural strands put into it by a whole lot of different people. And it's our obligation, if we're getting kids ready for the 21st century, to not just acknowledge, but to celebrate the multitude of influences that go into shaping our society and world.
Join us back here in 2 weeks for our final part on our discussion about race.